Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Infostretch's webinar titled Moving from Legacy Development Tools to Transformative DevOps with Enterprise Jenkins. My name is Josh Galdi, and I am Director of Marketing here at Infostretch, and will be your host today. Today's presenters include Sunil Pillai, Director of Infostretch Labs here at Infostretch. He is an experienced engineering leader for mobile and enterprise applications. He has built and managed offshore and on-site engineering teams, managed mobile projects for Fortune 500 clients, and has deep technical and functional expertise in mobile and enterprise applications. We're also joined by Carrie Price. Carrie is Director of Partner Marketing at CloudBees. She is focused on cultivating mutually beneficial go-to-market relationships with CloudBees Strategic Technology Alliance partners and global business partners to help joint customers uncover their competitive advantage. Prior to CloudBees, Carrie spent the last 7 years at Red Hat, where she drove global marketing efforts for Red Hat's partnerships with SAP, Symantec, and Cloudera, as well as served as Solutions Portfolio Manager for Red Hat Services Solutions Engineering Team. A couple things we want to cover, a couple housekeeping items. Number one, this webcast is being recorded and will be distributed via email to you, along with the slides, allowing you to share it with your internal teams or watch it again later. Second, if I can arrow, your line is currently muted, and if you do have any questions, please feel free to utilize the Q&A panel, which you can find in the center part of your screen. If you click on Q&A panel, you should be able to enter a question, and we will respond to throughout the broadcast. We will do our best to keep this webinar to our 45-minute time allotment, and we should have no problems doing that. At this time, I will go ahead and turn it over to Sunil, and he will take it from here.
Thank you, Josh. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. It's my pleasure to be presenting this today with Carrie. So Infostretch essentially provides services across the entire application lifecycle, right from design to development and of course DevOps. We are a CloudBees Platinum partner, and we are also a founding member of the DevOps Express initiative. Next one here. Carrie?
Helps enterprise organizations automate software development and delivery. We start with Jenkins, the most trusted and widely adopted CI/CD platform, and we add enterprise-grade security, scalability, manageability, and support to really help you continually deliver and improve the software that fuels your business. I'll dive into Jenkins and CloudBees Jenkins Platform a little more in this session, but for now I'd like to pass it back to Sunil.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, so let me All right, there you go. So what are we talking about today? So today, essentially, we want to kind of take you through a journey of what is involved in really moving from legacy DevOps tools to newer modern DevOps toolchain, and the whole idea of giving those insights on the migration journey is because it is challenging, but there are strategies to mitigate it, and there are best practices around it, which we are very happy to share with you. So we'll talk about some of the existing legacy tool sets, what are their attributes, what should be the attributes of a modern tool set, and the motivations for moving to the modern tool sets, and what are some strategies around doing that. And we'll cap it with some important aspects about Enterprise Jenkins. Okay. So let's get started. Let's see. Oops, sorry. There you go. Okay. So what does the typical legacy toolchain look like? Now, what you see on the screen is essentially a snapshot of some of the legacy tools in the toolchain. It's by no means the entire set of tools because there's so many, but they're quite representative of the different areas of DevOps. And one of the things we would notice is that there is a tool for every aspect of DevOps, but within legacy toolchain, historically, they've always been heavy in one area versus the other. For example, you would see that you have a lot of build management tools around shell scripts or other scripting languages that you use, and kind of, because that's where a lot of the DevOps initiatives, the genesis for DevOps really start from in companies. And these scripts really, over a period of time, they kind of proliferate and they expand to actually serve the different areas of DevOps, right? So you would have engineers who would write scripts to kind of help with build management, then they would write help with deployment, they would write something to help with monitoring. So the typical legacy tool chain would be heavy in one area versus the other, and mostly around build management tools. And the different aspects of DevOps then managed through some of these customized tool sets. You would also see things like messaging and notifications are not really geared more towards a real-time actionable feedback that you can get in some of the modern tool chain, which I'll talk about later. But they are more passive in nature, and where the reaction to those notifications, etc., are done in an offline channel, for example. You would see things like cloud, AWS, and Rackspace here. Now, when we mention AWS, it's important to note that it's about how do you use the AWS deployments, and in case of legacy tools versus the modern deployments that you want to kind of run with. You would see very little containerization typically, so you have a lot of hardware impacts on how you deploy them. So there are some aspects of legacy toolchain, but they're really characterized by being heavy in certain areas of DevOps, and mostly a lot of customized scripts that needs to be put together to achieve what you want to achieve with DevOps. So given this kind of a snapshot, really, so what are the real main issues with legacy tools, and what is the motivation to transition? Now, one of the important aspects of DevOps essentially is that it's about speed to market. So you really want to get your products to the market faster. You want to reduce your cycle time, and you want to iterate as much as possible. And what that means is that the underlying DevOps infrastructure, the plumbing layer for that, needs to be pretty nimble and fast and low maintenance, so that you can have the main processes run as fast as possible. What happens with legacy toolchain is that you have a lot of effort spent in actually maintaining them. You have a lot of effort in kind of enhancing them, and actually keep the lights running as far as the DevOps the layer itself goes. So essentially, these tools, when you kind of put them together, because they've been designed for an era where really tool chains were not prevalent, you have to write a lot of customization to actually make them work together, right? So you have to make them talk together and really make sure that you kind of get your DevOps process moving from one stage to the other. So the excessive customization leads to a lot of maintenance, and hence you have to kind of keep a lot of effort in making sure that they are enhanced and they are optimized for the purposes that you want to be used for. The other attribute that you would also see is that they are built for platforms. It will not necessarily be open platforms. The tools themselves may not be open source, so you're kind of stuck sometimes with proprietary tools that you have to kind of, you're locked in from that angle. And that also restricts the kind of support that you might get from the community to actually enhance it. So given these factors, when they come in, what you really end up with is a tool chain which really doesn't support some of the key CI/CD functionalities that you would really need, like you want coded pipelines, for example, right? So you want amount of containerization to be built into it so you can deploy easily, and those are not really readily available, and hence you kind of spend a lot of time maintaining something which really can be really streamlined with the modern set of toolchain, and that itself becomes one of the main motivations why it is important to kind of look at the modern toolchains and what are the migration paths towards it. Okay. So talking about legacy tool, we kind of looked at a few attributes about legacy toolchain. So what about a modern toolchain? Now, in terms of a modern toolchain, one of the important aspects is CI/CD, so continuous integration, continuous delivery. And one of the important areas is where these layers are kind of connected together, and every stage within CI and CD also being able to connect together. So the important aspect of it would be real seamless integration between different tools in the toolchain. And what that really means is that you really have aspects of open source deployments available. So you have open platforms on which these are deployed. So if you take Jenkins for the matter, it has a huge community around it, which means you can not only deploy it on a platform, but you also get a lot of support from extensible plugins that can be added onto Jenkins to expand your capabilities. So being able to integrate very well, being able to kind of support a plug and play architecture and a plugin architecture is very important. The other important aspect of a modern toolchain would be where you need a lot of power of customization through coding. So the aspect of coded pipelines essentially enables you to kind of orchestrate your DevOps processes and your build processes and your deployment processes in a way that really suits your organization without having to really worry about the restrictions that the tool might kind of impose on you. So having the ability to really write strong scripts in some domain-specific language, or maybe even Ruby script for that matter, gives you a strength of integration which can really harness the power of a good DevOps chain and really make it very optimized for your purposes. A good tool chain also would need to have the right interfaces to kind of connect to external systems. For example, you may want to invoke your CI/CD pipeline through a third-party process. So on a trigger of a third-party process, you want it to be invoked. So you want the right kind of REST APIs available for your tool chain to be invoked from that angle. If not, then you have a manual process have to be built in, which really kind of defeats the purpose of DevOps to some extent. Then we're talking about enterprise grade scale, right? So we're talking about multiple pipelines to be run, and when you need multiple pipelines, multiple jobs to be run for multiple products, what that essentially means is you need a scalable architecture. You need to be able to run multiple masters with multiple slaves and have the orchestration capability to kind of manage them right from the environment level to the job in a very seamless manner. And what that also means is that you really need enterprise grade components of security and virtualization built in, supporting so that you can really scale easily depending on your organization, along with your organization's needs. And then last but not the least, it's important to be able to share a lot of libraries from third parties that you can actually enhance your jobs with, and eventually to have a good orchestrated, a good dashboard view of your entire orchestration. Right? So many times you have older legacy tool chains where you have pipelines running, and you have a one-off view into some of these pipelines, but really to get an orchestrated view, either you have to write a lot of scripts to kind of make it happen, or you have to really kind of look at it in an individual siloed manner. And that really doesn't help the case for a good streamlined CI/CD. So one of the important aspects, obviously, is to have that kind of visibility across the entire dashboard, which we could give different names like stage flow, etc. So this kind of, in a summary, are really the attributes of a modern tool chain, and that is again the motivation for us to kind of move towards this. So let's look at having talked about attributes, let's look at what are the typical tools in a tool chain. I'm pretty sure for those on this webinar, a lot of these names will be familiar. And one of the important attributes of a lot of these is a lot of it is open source. They have a very strong community following behind it, and they are very purpose built for specific areas, and also built in a way that you can really integrate with other tools, and also integrate it with an orchestration like Jenkins or CloudBees Enterprise Jenkins. And you would also notice in the modern tool chain is that they are the best of breed tools. So they have been time tested over a period of time in their individual capacity. Right? So you would see, for example, Artifactory and Nexus. They are very strong repositories which have been in use also outside the realm of DevOps. But when you orchestrate it or when you integrate it with DevOps and the Jenkins chain, it really enhances its value. So you have an open architecture, you have a scalable architecture, you have containerization, you have repositories built in, you have open source tools for static code analysis, code coverage, etc. You have open source build tools, and you kind of bring them all together and orchestrate it by an open source tool like Jenkins. Then the power is unparalleled. And so easy integration, strong community support, and ability to be orchestrated by a tool like Jenkins actually leans itself well to kind of work very well for a very scalable pipeline architecture. And also, you would see notifications for the matter. I did talk about emails and pager in my previous slide. You would see that modern notifications are more, it goes into HipChat, goes into Slack. That there are developers who subscribe to the channel reacting to notifications coming from pipeline really fast and feeding back in. And that really gives you the power to kind of iterate very well and supports your agile development methodology. Okay. So moving on, so we talked about legacy toolchain, we talked about modern toolchain, we talked about the reasons why we need to migrate, and what are the main motivations for doing that. then it's important to look at, what are the typical migration challenges and what typically an organization kind of face kind of managing it. So there are two main categories of challenges, if you will. So one is, of course, the idea that there is an organizational cultural challenge, or maybe in terms of structure, or maybe in terms of philosophy or development that needs to be tackled. And of course, the other part is going to be the technical challenge of, okay, how do you kind of manage this migration from a whole set of toolchain tools to a new set of tools, and they probably have no interconnection with each other. So on the organizational front, it is important to kind of take the right approach and not take a big bang approach, right? So which means that we have to kind of always look at it from a perspective of saying that, okay, as an organization, this is the reason why we want to move to a modern toolchain. What are the business drivers behind it? And hence, you kind of look at what kind of projects really can be identified for a process like this. And then you start working with a couple of projects which are trailblazers in your attempt to kind of move to the modern toolchain and have pilots built out and have the right skill set developed around it. So essentially, you're kind of building a small team which becomes a mini center of excellence around these DevOps practice that you want to build. And that gives you the confidence and that gives you the visibility as to when we take on a new set of toolchain, what are the implications of doing that. And once you have built that out, or from an organizational perspective, you also have to kind of look at, are your processes kind of spanning across multiple departments? And if you're spanning across multiple departments, what are the communication channels between those departments today? And are they automated in a fashion, or are they pretty transparent and pretty collaborative in nature? If not, then those are the areas that needs to be tackled, because those are important aspects of how DevOps would kind of reflect in right runtime, right? But some of the challenges that you would see from an organizational culture and structure perspective will manifest itself in some of the DevOps problems that you might face as you run through these DevOps cycles. Then, of course, from an organizational perspective, if you're taking on a big migration project, there is also justification of ROI. And shorter cycle times are often a big driver for why it's important. And Carrie will touch upon some of these aspects in our slides down the line. Talking about technical challenges, one of the technical challenges obviously is that you have a whole set of toolchain and you're kind of moving to a new set of toolchain, and which means that you have to keep the process as less disruptive as possible while you're actually building on a new set of toolchain. So there'll be times when you're actually in the migration path where you actually have a mix of both set of toolchain before you end up with a complete cutover, and it is important to kind of maintain the processes running so that the development cycles are not kind of impacted. And then you also have to kind of keep it stable, because stability is important. Otherwise, when you especially are dealing with a migration path and when there are issues in it, I think one of the big challenges is to figure out, okay, where is the issue? Is it in the migration strategy? Is it in my older tool chain? Is it my newer tool chain? So it kind of complicates the problem, right? So in terms of technical challenges, it is important to kind of look at, okay, what is the process today? What would be the migration path towards it? And then how do you kind of reduce the manual steps as much as possible to kind of make it automated, right? So you would see a lot of small automation pieces which are built in, which aren't present today, to be kind of support your final DevOps toolchain migration strategy. And branch by abstraction pattern is a very popular pattern, and the idea essentially is that when you're really moving a lot of things together, you have to create proxies for those things which are being moved, so that your dependent processes actually speak to those proxies while the actual processes are being changed behind the scene. So that's a great strategy pattern to actually allow you to kind of move pieces of components actually of a larger system without really breaking down the entire system. And a lot of the migrations that we help with, really we kind of follow the branch by abstraction pattern to really make it make it very streamlined. So these are the migration challenges, and kind of how do you kind of deal with it. Now there's some specific migration best practices or strategies to kind of mitigate these challenges, and there are several. So the key ones really are, if you start with, we can talk about a model demo project. So what is really a model demo project? This is where you take an existing project across maybe your multiple platforms, or you could divide it across your multiple disciplines, and try to take those projects try to identify those projects, and then try to kind of build the DevOps or the CI/CD toolchain around it. And what that helps you with is that you kind of have a perfect representation of either different business units in organization or different technologies in organization as to how they would behave in the new toolchain structure. And you get a lot of the data points that you would need before you kind of pan it out to the larger organization. So this works very well when you have disparate business units or disparate product lines that you're dealing with, which have different technologies that you're dealing with, and which may have customized DevOps existing tool chains that you have created. So one of the first questions is, okay, what does that mean when I move to a very streamlined DevOps tool chain? So you can pick up model demo projects from individual technology business units and try to kind of create tool chains for them. The other strategy is the Greenfield Strategy. This is where you start with a whole new project and basically say, this is going to be our next generation showcase project in terms of your agile methodology and also in terms of a DevOps tool chain. So here you're really starting from scratch. You have a lot of leeway in deciding what are the tools that you need to put in and what should be the timelines around it. And you can tweak and you can play around a lot with this Greenfield Strategy. And this really works well when you have a lot of interconnected processes that exist today, and you may not have the leeway to actually go and change one of them without really disrupting a lot of the other processes. So it is best to start with a greenfield project and kind of have that as a showcase POC, and then you can kind of open it up to the larger organization. The third piece is more of a DevOps culture. So here is where we take a step back and say, okay, let's kind of look at our organizational structure, our culture, and then try to kind of work on that and try to align the right people, the right teams, and the right philosophies around DevOps first, so that you can lay your best practices in place, etc., before you really migrate on before you really embark on a greenfield or a model demo project strategy, right? So this helps really when you're a large organization and you have multiple different philosophies of development which goes on in an organization. So it's important to have a DevOps culture laid across the entire organization. Agile project management is a very important part to mention here, because a lot of times you may have projects which are not agile in nature, and you may want to move to a new set of DevOps tool chain, and you'll find that sometimes these do get orthogonal in a way. So it is important to kind of identify and get the projects which are agile or which are moving to agile, and make them as the initial showcases for implementing your CI/CD strategy. And last but not the least, it is important to have a clearly defined migration path. So, which means that you cannot just basically decide and embark on a tool chain strategy. You have to define as to what the migration path is, where do you want to go, and what would be the steps kind of helping you lead there. And then the other pieces would kind of fall in place. Right? With that, I'll hand it over to Carrie to take it from here.
Thank you, Sunil.
Sure.
So as you can see, just as you have a lot of options in terms of the strategy that you'll take in terms of modernizing your CI/CD toolchain, you can see that there is quite a vast ecosystem of tools to review and to look at as you're doing that. I'm going to focus today on Jenkins and on CloudBees Jenkins Platform, which, based on the functionality we deliver, we see as the hub for continuous delivery. But as you can see, there are a lot of tools, and I think this is where working with a company like Infostretch can be highly, highly beneficial to you in determining what that right set of modern tools are best for your organization. So with that, I will dive into a little bit regarding Jenkins open source as well as CloudBees Jenkins Platform. So 10 years ago, continuous integration entered the scene when our now CTO, Kazuki Kawaguchi, created Jenkins. And he created it to really address the speed problem with automation. Jenkins really allowed code to be put into a framework to compress repetitive tasks like commits, builds, and unit tests. And since that time, Jenkins has really grown to become the de facto standard for continuous integration with millions of users and projects across the world. And it also has become, a core technology within the application development ecosystem. So as we talk to organizations about their use of Jenkins, we've begun to see a pattern emerge as Jenkins usage has grown within an organization or within organizations. And so see if any of these sound familiar to you. First of all, the popularity of Jenkins as an open source software package means that more and more teams are downloading it and using Jenkins. And this can cause what we call Jenkins sprawl, where an organization or an enterprise organization can somewhat lose control over who's using it, what the developers are doing with it, and how much resources it's consuming. So one of the areas where the CloudBees Jenkins platform can help support that is, they can help by managing Jenkins sprawl with what's a component of the CloudBees Jenkins platform called Operations Center, and this provides that manageability aspect around it. In addition, Jenkins has more than 1,000 plugins readily available in the open source community. But what that does is it makes it hard to control who's using which plugins. There's a governance factor when you're starting to look at deploying Jenkins more broad scale across your organization that needs to be considered. Because if developers may be using various plugins, and unbeknownst to you, there may be some technical problems or really more technical conflicts that may arise between plugins that may cause inefficient use of resources. And so we have, with CloudBees Jenkins Platform, our custom plugin update center that can help support that. Security, this is an issue that you may have, that you may want to have more control over, who's accessing Jenkins and what they're doing with it. The CloudBees Jenkins platform provides enterprise level features around role-based access control and folders for managing that. In terms of downtime, we recently surveyed Jenkins users, and we found that 92% of them said that Jenkins is mission critical. And so, you want to ensure that you don't have that downtime. So additional features such as high availability and cluster operation features are offered in the CloudBees Jenkins platform to deliver that type of enterprise scale capabilities that you need. You may be looking to, push more workloads to Jenkins. You may look to have it run faster, make sure that it's optimized, its performance is optimized, and really looking to run Jenkins at massive scale. This is another area where the enterprise scale version delivered by CloudBees Jenkins platform can help. Monitoring, visualization, as well as technical support. So one of the biggest challenges that we hear about is that that technical support does not exist with the open source version of Jenkins. So what that means is if you're running mission critical enterprise scale Jenkins and you need someone to help resolve an issue or a bug fix, you'll get probably more enterprise grade support when you're working with CloudBees versus what you would get with an open source solution. So support is really, really critical at this point. So those are just some of the ways that the CloudBees Jenkins platform can kind of amplify Jenkins open source. So let's take a look at where Jenkins plays and where more emphasis needs to be placed as organizations consider taking that journey to enterprise continuous delivery. Clearly, Jenkins is a solid, safe, and widely adopted foundation to build upon. Since this is open source, you're going to need to consider how to support and maintain your large-scale automation, implementation, and support is really the bedrock to consider under your Jenkins foundation. You'll also need to adopt security plugins and practices to assure that the right user access and audit controls are in place to meet your compliance requirements. And as projects multiply and, as I mentioned earlier, potentially could sprawl, the ability to scale and operate the many components requires more focus and resources. And so high availability and redundancy become critical to maintain the velocity of the delivery pipelines. And of course, with much activity and operational effort, the need to manage the overall systems and gain visibility and control of the operations also becomes very, very critical. But once in place, you have a solid and flexible platform for large-scale, complex continuous delivery. So Jenkins is not your typical open source project, but what it does share with other open source tools is a lack of core capabilities that most larger organizations require as systems become critical to business continuity. So as usage grows, teams will typically need, support, a place where they can go to ask questions, to get help with plugins. They'll need security to assure team access as well as to maintain the compliance and traceability. You'll be looking for scalability as usage spreads from individuals to teams to larger groups. Scalability issues can arise. Jenkins initially was not designed for this, so this needs particular support and attention. And then finally, manageability, especially with complex pipelines, multiple user groups and projects, visibility and manageability become critical to getting the most out of your Jenkins. So these are some of the gaps that were identified. So that's really where CloudBees Jenkins Platform, comes into play. We take that base core strong foundation that Jenkins delivers, and we really add on those enterprise features. So how do you know if an enterprise scale solution from CloudBees is the right approach for you, or if open source will meet your needs? So here are just a couple of questions you can ask yourself. Are you looking to increase developer productivity by leveraging advanced developer features? Are you looking to get access to Jenkins support experts for problem resolution? Are you looking to run Jenkins operations at scale to support a large number of developers or teams? Are you looking to monitor usage and share resources across your Jenkins implementation? Those are some of the places where you can look. And this really gives you the overview. So you can see that we've got the foundational support. We have the added features to help provide. We've got the container, cloud and container support. And then, of course, we have the option of both on-prem or in the cloud for deployments based on your needs. So I mentioned earlier, we add on these features onto the Jenkins open source, and I just wanted to share with you. Here are some of the features that you'll get that may not necessarily that are not necessarily available in Jenkins open source. These are things such as reusable job templates, automatic failover to recover from master failures, Docker agents, the ability to monitor GitHub pull requests, that role-based access control, and end-to-end CD pipelines with Jenkins pipeline. So these are just some of the features that the Enterprise Edition or the Enterprise will provide for you. So this isn't a chart that I necessarily am intending for you to read completely here on the screen, but what it does represent is some data that we mined from a couple of our customer success stories. So if you take a look at it, you can see that there are some strong impacts across the delivery cycle, and sometimes with dramatic results. When you look at this, you can see that there are huge reduction in person hours. There's an elimination of time and effort, and even in some cases, and there's also a reduction in bug identification and fix time. But what we've highlighted in yellow are some specific delivery tasks. Whoops, jumped on me, sorry. Are some specific delivery tasks around deployment time, development time, and build-related tasks. And we did some quick math, and we came up with some pretty impressive results. Just from this set of customers, this small set of customers, we identified that these customers experience a 6x faster delivery, which is pretty impressive across the board. This is an ongoing study, and we will absolutely be continuing to monitor this, but it just gives you a snapshot of when you're deploying CloudBees Jenkins Platform, what the benefit could be to your organization. So to dive into a specific case study, I want to share with you a case study for a customer, Orbitz. Basically, what Orbitz did is it came to us and it wanted to shorten the delivery times for more than 180 applications that power 13 of their different websites. They worked with CloudBees to really refine their software delivery processes, and they implemented both, open source Jenkins, but also the CloudBees solution for continuous delivery. And really what they walked away with is they walked away with 3 key results. One being that they were able to cut their release cycles by more than 75%. They were able to better focus their teams on the higher value tasks, not necessarily those more, as I mentioned earlier, redundant or mundane tasks. And they were able to amplify their user experience by increasing their testing that they were able to deliver due to the automation that it provided. We have a YouTube video on this case study, so I encourage you to go to the CloudBees website and watch that video and hear a little bit more about what we were able to do for orbits. But yeah, so it was a very good story. So, in conclusion, again, Jenkins and CloudBees Jenkins Platform really kind of serve as that hub of the continuous delivery ecosystem. Jenkins has over more than 1.2 million users. As I mentioned earlier, there are 1,200 plus plugins available. And as you can see, we integrate with a large set of technologies to really help you get towards modernizing your CI/CD toolchain. And again, this is a great opportunity to work with a partner like Infostretch to help identify which of those tools and what's the best strategy for you to really migrate and achieve that modern CI/CD toolchain. So with that, I'll pass it back to Sunil.
Thank you, Carrie. So just to recap, essentially, when we talk about migration and we talk about newer set of toolchain, I strongly believe that it is important that we don't look at just feature parity, right? So it is not enough to basically say that, okay, I'm going to get what I was getting from my older set of tool chains with the new set. We have to make sure that we can harness it completely to really get the best value out of it. And that is where something like Enterprise Jenkins and open source Jenkins, they come into play. So looking at your migration strategy, once you've defined it and once you say that, okay, I got to have these, developed across multiple pipelines, multiple jobs, etc., it is important to kind of look at and say, okay, am I getting the right dashboard analytics capabilities that I need? Am I getting enough of support for my plugins? Am I getting enough of scalability, etc.? And depending on where you are in your stage, as Carrie mentioned, right? You could start with open source, and then there is an adoption path to basically say, okay, now this needs Enterprise Jenkins kind of a strategy to kind of take it further and to scale it across my entire organization. So recapping, migration from one set of tools to the other has a definite strategy that can be implemented, and it is important to keep the end goal in mind and understand the attributes of Enterprise Jenkins and open source Jenkins, and then define your migration path and path accordingly. And this slide really recaps some of the important attributes of CloudBees Enterprise Jenkins, which could really be relevant for your organization. With that, Josh, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Sunil, and thanks, Carrie, for walking us through that. Really appreciate it. At this time, we'll go ahead and take some questions. If you go to the center top part of your screen, you'll be able to open the Q&A window. Feel free to enter a question or two if you have for Carrie or Sunil about our presentation today. While we're waiting for to get some questions in here, I did want to mention that Infostretch is offering a free assessment of and an opportunity for you to meet with one of our Jenkins experts. We're going to be sending out an email to you shortly after this webinar, in which we'll have a link where you can contact someone directly. So we look for that. Keep an eye out for that on your email. So with that, I'll go ahead and looks like we're getting some questions in. The first one is for Sunil, and it is: does the transformation need an organizational structure change? Do they need to change their structure?
Right. That's a good question and a very relevant question. So it may not necessarily need an organizational change. I think what is really important is to form the right kind of a body of which can really take DevOps from a group and actually take it across the organization. So it is important to start from that strategy and have a body which represents multiple different groups within your organization. So they are representative of the problems that exist, and then define a DevOps strategy according to that. And I think that is the right approach to take. So not necessarily it might need an organizational structure change.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And a question here for Carrie. Someone is asking how you differ from Jenkins OSS. How is this different from the open source?
No, that's a good question. So again, CloudBees is really built upon Jenkins, and so what you're going to get when you're implementing a CloudBees Jenkins platform solution is you're going to be getting that supported enterprise version of Jenkins. You're going to get those core enterprise plugins around manageability, security, scalability. You're also going to get fully QA tested solution and verified plugins even from third party providers. And then finally, the security updates and patches. That's another core, especially if you're looking to run Jenkins in a very mission-critical format, or deployment rather. Those security updates and patches will be key. And then, of course, the support, the gold and platinum level support that you can also secure with the CloudBees Jenkins platform.
Super. Great. So this next question is for Sunil, and the question is, do we have to be an agile organization before adopting these newer tools? Is that a requirement?
So it is definitely recommended that the projects that DevOps is implemented on are agile projects, because the real value of DevOps and CI/CD and the newer tool chains is really speed to market, iteration, faster feedback, and these are the important attributes of agile too. So since they kind of both go together, I would say definitely if not as an entire organization though, but the projects that we embark on with CI/CD toolchain definitely helps to those to be agile in nature.
Okay, good to know. This one is for Carrie, specific to CloudBees. So is CloudBees a forked version of Jenkins?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So in some open source situations, that is the case. But in the terms of CloudBees Jenkins Platform and Jenkins, no, CloudBees Jenkins Platform is not a forked version of Jenkins. It is actually built upon the latest releases of Jenkins, and that is integrated into the CloudBees Jenkins Platform. So hopefully that answers your question. And of course, any additional questions, welcome you to visit www.cloudbees.com to learn a little bit more.
Great, thank you. And looks like our last question, we have time for this last question, so we'll go ahead and do that. We'll end on time. This is for Sunil, and this question says, our biggest challenge is to change the tires while the car is running at 100 miles an hour. And what is your take on that? Because that definitely seems to be a common concern.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think we hear that a lot, and that's a very relevant concern too. So I think our strategy and our methodology always has been, define, manage, and then phase in. So what that means is that you have to always define what is the end goal that you want to get to, and define all the different stages that need to happen to kind of transition, and then manage the phase in process one at a time. So that challenge would never go away, but the way to do that is that you have to pick the pieces that you can transition out and keep the hybrid mode on for a while till you completely kind of cut over. But that needs the right methodology defined right at the beginning, and then a very close diligent management of the process to kind of make it. And it's all about change management. So once we have the right change agents in place to manage it, then it becomes a really manageable issue at the end. So manage, define, and then phase in. I think that's our philosophy. That should be the philosophy to manage the problem.
Okay. Great. Well, that concludes our webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. You will receive an email in the next 24 hours with the slide presentation and link to this webcast replay to share amongst your teams. As I mentioned earlier, Infostretch is offering a free no obligation assessment with one of our Jenkins experts, and you will be able to, there'll be a link in that email for you to click on to access that. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact us at info@infostretch.com or call us at 1-408-727-1100 to talk directly to a representative. Thanks again to Carrie and Sunil for their time today, and that will conclude this webinar. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you.
You.